Albert Breer covers the league, MMQB and NBC Sports Boston. Albert, we started the show. We were looking for the third best wide receiver in NFL history, modern day era. If we assume it's Jerry Rice and then it's Randy Moss, should we assume Moss is second on that list all time?
You know, I think Owens is right there with Moss. I covered both of them. The one difference between the two where I think you give the nod to Owens, I think Owens was a little harder to shut down. Like Moss, as spectacular as he was and as dominant as he could be, there was a certain way that you could take him out of a game. Where with Owens at his very best, and you can go back and look, there's a 1 month period there with the Cowboys during that 2007 season where he had about 600 or 700 yards receiving and I think 10 touchdowns. And I was covering the Cowboys then. And I just tell you, like, there was nothing anybody could do to stop him. And so I think Moss probably had a little bit better of a career, but Owens had this ability to be almost uncoverable that I'm not sure Moss quite had.
Who else is in that conversation as the second or third best receiver of all time, modern day era?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, Rice is obviously – I think Rice is far and away number one.
Larry Fitzgerald?
I think Fitz would be in there. I mean, Calvin Johnson for a shorter period of time was so dominant, but I guess that would almost be like a Gale Sayers type thing, you know, where it just didn't last that long. Yeah, I mean, I think Calvin will be in that category. Larry Fitzgerald, obviously, for the longevity and the ability to pivot and almost reinvent himself as a player later in his career. You know, somewhat similar to what the way Rice did late in his career. Yeah, I mean, I think those would be the guys. I mean, I don't know if you get into like the Marvin Harrisons, where Marvin was a very good, very, very good receiver for a long time and a dominant offense. You got a lot of guys like that. So and the other thing that's tough, Dan, it's just you go era to era and the numbers don't really match up. I mean, you can go back into the 70s and look at guys like Lynn Swann, and if you match them up numbers, it doesn't even look like those guys are close, and so much of that's about opportunity.
We talked about Terrell Owens not going to Canton, Ohio, but is it true that the players are trying to have this initiative where you must sign a document promising that you'll attend the induction ceremony? Are we close to that actually being reality?
Yeah, I know Mike Florio reported that. I haven't heard that myself, so I don't know how close that is to being reality or not. I would just make the argument here that, and look, I've talked to some guys who are in the Hall of Fame about this. I just think that the Hall of Fame is a museum that's supposed to celebrate the history of the game, and to take pieces of the history of the game out just to prop up the Hall of Fame weekend, I personally think would be wrong. I think what the Hall of Fame is there for is, for 50, in 50 or 100 years, someone can walk in there and they can see and read about Terrell Owens and Randy Moss and all these great players who came, a long time before the guys who are in the game now. And so, to me, it's just I personally have always felt like it's silly to take pieces of history of the game out of a place like that just in order to prop up some ceremony or some weekend.
In one sentence, why wasn't Terrell Owens a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I personally think that a lot of the people on the committee held his locker room issues against him. And, I understand it's sort of a gray area because you're not supposed to take off-field things into consideration. And, is how the guy is a teammate, is how the guy conducts himself in the locker room. Is that a factor? I think you can argue that both ways, whether or not it should be or it shouldn't be. I just, I would say this. He was so dominant for a number of years that I don't know how anybody could look at that and say, him doing sit-ups in his driveway or whatever would outweigh his accomplishments on the field.
But here, but the thing is, Albert, I don't understand this. It feels like we hold you're more accountable for what you are as a teammate than what you were doing outside of that, where you might have been arrested or somebody,
right.
is caught with drugs and hookers in a hotel room, or, suspended for drugs, or Brett Favre, was he a great teammate if he was, on painkillers? That's what I'm not sure. I think we need to be fair to Terrell Owens.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're being fair. I think we're picking and choosing with him.
Yeah, I agree. And the way I look at this is just, again, like I've always looked at the Hall of Fame as a museum, not a church. It's there to explain the history of the game, to tell the story of great players. And I've always felt like the barometer for getting in the Hall of Fame is, can you tell the story of an era without a guy? And I really think it'd be difficult to tell the story of the era Terrell Owens played in without talking about Terrell Owens. And I know that you can play games with that too, where there are certain, you can't tell the story of this decade without telling the story of Aaron Hernandez. It doesn't mean he should be a Hall of Famer, but I think that there are guys who made an impact on the field that, you just can't tell a story of the game without them. And I just think Terrell Owens is one of those guys. And I do think part of it is, the way that he treated certain people in the media. And I don't think that's fair at all. I don't think that the fact that, maybe he could be prickly to deal with or pain in the ass, I've never felt like that should have anything to do with anybody going into any Hall of Fame. And so that's just been my opinion on it, that, you should mostly hold this should be mostly about your accomplishments on the field. And I do think that it's fair to look at who he is as a teammate. That can be a little bit of a gray area, just because it does affect what happens on the field. But I actually like the way football does it, where they take most of the off-field stuff out of it, because I just don't think those committees should be any sort of moral arbiter.
We're talking Albert Breer, the MMQB and NBC Sports Boston. Kelvin Benjamin, no longer with Cam Newton in Carolina, but some parting shots there a couple of years after the fact, where he wishes he would have played for a smarter quarterback, a more accurate quarterback. Was what Kelvin Benjamin saying actually true? I mean, we look at it and go, boy, how can you criticize him? But did he say something that's factually correct?
I don't think Cam Newton is for most receivers. I think playing with Cam Newton can be frustrating, just because there are the accuracy issues. He is a little bit unpredictable. He tends to play outside the offense a little bit. So I do know that there are receivers who've been through there in the past. Because Cam isn't the most conventional quarterback, that have been frustrated and have felt like their production's been affected by playing with him. It's not hard to see where Kelvin Benjamin, now a former first-round pick, would be going, into the end of his rookie contract and looking back at it and saying, this guy might have cost me some money. And so, I think that absolutely exists. And I think that's something that Norv Turner and Scott Turner and the new offensive coaches there in Carolina are trying to work on now, where they're trying to get him to play within the offense, not taking away what he does well, but make him a little bit more efficient and make him use the offense to his advantage a little bit more. And part of it was, Dave Gettleman's decision, before he was fired in 2017 to draft Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel to try to create more easy completions for him. And so they tried to make him more efficient as a passer. I think you can also argue that at his best, Cam Newton is an unconventional player. And a lot of times for receivers, it can be frustrating to play with a quarterback like that.
First rookie quarterback to start will be?
Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold has the best shot right now. I'd say he has a better than 50-50 shot to start against Detroit in week one. And I think it's really about how he handled last year at SC, number one. Took a lot of hits and was able to compartmentalize mistakes, which are two things you're going to need to be able to do as a rookie. And so that's number one. And then number two, he's made great progress in his 3 months since he's been in the building. And he's a quick study. And the one thing that's interesting about him, Dan, is he actually hasn't played quarterback for that long. He was a linebacker his sophomore year in high school. And he's not one of these classically trained guys who had a personal coach when he was 8 or 9 years old. He's still learning the position. So there's a lot of growth potential there, and he's sort of figured it out athletically in the time since he's become a quarterback. And so I think that they believe that if he does everything right over the next 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to be hard to keep him on the bench. So I think Darnold's got the best chance to be starting week 1 of all the rookie quarterbacks. I would put Josh Rosen second.
Good stuff, Albert. Thank you. We appreciate your time. Safe travels.
All right, thanks, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, MMQB, NBC Sports, Boston.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.